Let's see here. We should be going live any second now. Should be connecting. Are we connected? We're connecting. We're connecting. We are connected. Let's see. Let's go turn this down just a smidge more. And we'll go public and then we'll do our intro. Let's drink some water. This is my first stream, and I'm sure the vlog or whatever, the like recorded audio of this will include all of that awkward intro stuff. So if that happens when this goes live later, welcome to the stream early, I guess. But we're about to go public here, and then we'll do the intro. I've got butterflies. I might throw up from how nervous I am. Let's see. We're public. We are live a minute and a half. All right. How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Darian Answer. And today we're going to be playing Minecraft. I'm super excited because I've really wanted to combine my two favorite playstyles, Skyblock and Pixelmon, for a very long time. And I always wish there was a server that you could have like your own little Skyblock hub, like when you go on a Skyblock server. And like I always wish that you could like slash warp to like the Pixelmon world or whatever, and like go around collecting resources, whatever, go back to your main island. And it dawned on me that that would be super easy to do because you can just use the Skyblock map, and eventually like the world will start generating because it's procedurally generated. So if we start with Rowlet here, we'll be eventually strong enough to like evolve and then fly all the way to like new land and stuff. So I figured that we'll do that. And the other thing I want to do is I'm working on a novel right now, so I've got 11 chapters of the audiobook that's also in a playlist, and I figured while I'm playing I'm just going to listen to that and kind of see what I've written so far and make sure the story's sounding good. It's first draft, so there's always room for improvement. And I would love if you're coming along for the ride. If you have any like comments or anything you'd like to say about that story, something I'm super passionate about, and I would love to hear some feedback. You can read it on my Wattpad. I'll also link that in the description, or you can find that on my main channel. And if you like this, I would love it if you subscribed, or liked it, or disliked it. Anyways, I will get into this. I will stop talking. Let's go ahead and play the audiobook, and we'll start this playthrough.
I don't remember how long it's been. How many times have I told you our story? I asked shakily.
Right.
My resolve was wavering. A beautiful goldfish
So,
swam in a small gold-encased glass
we're on the Skyblock
bowl.
Island.
The bowl sat upon a small
And we're gonna
wooden
have
side table.
to
The table sat
basically
next
just start
to an
off
old
like you would with any
handmade
other
leather
Skyblock
chair.
map. It'll be a
The
while
fish
before we
was
get to the actual
obsidian black
Pixelmon
with
stuff.
burning red, crimson eyes. He gazed at me with an unyielding rage, a hatred that was palpable. Down the spine of his back were two large scars. Keep looking at me that way. I'll pull out another fin, I said mockingly. I winked towards the fish. The fish had 6 beautiful fins which flowed and swayed in an invisible current. They looked like black silk curtains wafting and dancing in a gentle midsummer breeze. It was a breathtaking fish,
Why is my
almost
sensitivity so
enchanting.
low?
The fish watched every one of my moves as I paced. Was I wrong to choose this for
that's
us?
a little too high.
I thought. Anxiety
Nailed it.
was swelling in my chest.
Didn't even have to try
A
for
loud
that.
howl interrupted my thoughts.
Put that and
Curiously,
oh yeah,
I
this is the
stopped
best part of this
pacing and
modded
walked
pack. So we're
towards the
doing a
front
Skyblock
door.
modded
I
thing. So
opened
we
it
also
slowly.
have the
A
one block mod,
dark
and
purple
when we're
wolf
ready,
came
we can
tumbling
place
in
this
at full
anywhere that we
speed.
want. It will have the
It tripped
infinite
over
one
its own
block,
feet and crashed into
and
the
that'll make
dining
the whole
room
Skyblock
table.
thing so much
I laughed
easier.
as I watched
But I
in
want to wait
slow
until we
motion.
place that
The
because I
beast's
have an idea
jawline flattened
for
against the wood surface.
kind of making it a
The
little bit
wolf had been
easier.
panting. When
Instead of
his
just it
face
being a
hit the
single
table,
block with
the
this
wolf
mod,
bit
it'll
his
place
tongue.
that
I heard a
individual
slight
block
whimper
that's
escape its
constantly
jowls.
regenerating,
It
but it
made
also
me laugh
encases it
harder.
in
I
like,
turned to
what
look
is
at
that,
the fish. I swear,
I don't know,
I
a
saw
square
a
of
bubble
blocks
or
or
two
whatever,
escape
and that
its mouth.
regenerates
As if it
every
also
time that
couldn't
there's
help
like a
but
new
let
thing,
out
and
a
you can't break
chuckle.
them,
I
and
turned
it's super
my focus
annoying.
to the wolf.
But it
It
actually
was
works out
now
to our
pulling
benefit because
itself
we can
up.
kind of
A deep-throated growl
automate it in a little
reverberated
bit, and
through
I'm
the
excited to
room.
show
The
that to
wolf
you.
slowly turned to
Other
face
than that,
the
I
fish.
guess
It
we'll
crept towards the bowl. It
get a
growled louder
cobblestone
the
generator
closer it
down,
got.
and
Its
then we can
nose
start
pressed the
expanding our
glass and
island out.
huffed. Fog
Oh.
temporarily blocked the fish from view. I could see the
The
wolf's
sensitivity is
reflection in
still
the
too
glass.
low.
The wolf's left eye was burning like molten gold. Where his right eye should have been was a
Let's try
socket sealed shut by a scar.
There we
His
go.
fur was like the night, dark but warm.
I don't like it
Its
too high,
muscles
but
bulged as it stood.
what
Its
I'm
tail
used to
was
having
nearly
it at is
2.5
a little
feet
too
long.
low.
He was 9
Also, my
feet
mouse is
long from
breaking, so
nose
you'll
to
see I
tail.
double click on
While
accident all the
standing on all
time,
four
and that's
paws,
completely
he stood
not
at a height
anything
of
I'm trying
5
to
feet
do.
and 3 inches. I snapped out of my admiration and clapped my hands. Welcome home, Fenrir, I praised. I ran over and rushed my fingers through
This
the
is
giant
the first time you get
creature's
introduced
fur.
to Fenrir
It
in the
was
book.
warm and
It is
calming.
Tyrell's pet
It
wolf.
helped me pull myself together, and I took a
Tyrell's
deep
the main
breath.
character.
Fenrir barked and jumped up and down. The weight of him shook the hut. The wolf fell to the floor with a flop and rolled
I
over
don't
onto
remember
its back.
how to make a cobblestone
It exposed
generator.
its
It
belly
should be
and
this,
chirped
right?
playfully as it squirmed back and forth. Oh, did someone
I'm really
make
scared
big
to break
poops?
that.
I laughed and cheered. Fenrir
Also,
barked
for
and
some
I
reason,
bent
it's not
down to
showing my
praise
chat.
him. Glad you're home, buddy. I
Or
was
it's not
close
giving me
to
the option
losing
to
it
chat
there,
with you guys.
I said softly. I got up and
may not
picked
be
up the
visible.
dining room table. The commotion
Oh,
had
there we
knocked
go.
the
It just
treasures
popped up.
I had
Nobody's
there
just...
onto the ground.
Okay.
I hadn't
Nobody
noticed
said
them in a
anything
very
yet.
long time. There were
Hello.
2 beaded necklaces.
I mean, nobody's probably watching
One
yet,
had a
but I
beautiful
just wanted to make
ivory
sure the chat
carved
was
cross in the
working.
center. The other had a cross made of ebony. Father Felipe and Sister Grace, I hope you two are rolling around on every cloud there.
This is a fun thing.
I blushed and a perverted grin
He's
grew on my
introducing
face.
items
I
that
giggled
correlate
at
to the other
memories
characters
of
that you're
Father
going to
Felipe,
meet
the
in the
way
next
he
few
carried
chapters
his
of my
coffin
book.
on his back yet stood so confident and tall.
Father
I bent down
Felipe
and
is a
picked
super
the
pervy
rosaries
priest.
up and set them back onto the dining room table. I looked around
Oh, no.
for more of the items and noticed a leather-bound book. I grabbed it and
I didn't
blew
mean to
the
make
dust
3 of
from
those.
the cover.
That's a bummer.
A pentagram embedded in silver poked out of the leather. The leather was made from the skin of a long-forgotten fallen
Trying to
angel.
multitask.
I barely touched the book up and instinctively ducked.
There we go.
Fear encompassed me and a shiver shot down
Don't ruin
my
it.
spine. I'm
good.
sorry. I squeaked. Fenrir had
Super
been
weird.
slurping water desperately out of
Oh,
the
no.
fish's bowl.
Did we lose that
He
dirt?
acted like he
No.
needed
Oh, but
every
we
drop
almost lost
to
everything.
survive dehydration. Because of the nature of the bowl being an
It's a
eternal
little
prison,
leggy, so
the
we're going to have
amount
to be
of water that
very
would
careful
reappear
until we
in
can
the
expand
bowl
our island out.
made it seem like an endless ocean. Fenrir turned his attention towards me. I saw his golden eye focus on the book and then on me. A moment of clarity came over the wolf's face and it pulled a paw up to its mouth. He began to snort as if laughing at me. Shut up.
Fenrir has
It's
2 different
still
colored
so
eyes.
weird that she would leave this with us. Besides,
I don't
you
remember.
know full well how
We must have
scary
already
she
heard,
could
but
be.
one of them is
I
missing
said,
at this
arguing.
point in the
Fenrir
story.
nodded in agreement and for a moment
This
looked
is the
scared
introduction
himself.
to the book
He got
series,
up
and it might be
walked
like
towards
corny,
the rug
but
in
it
front
opens
of the
up with
fireplace
him
and
like
laid down.
at the end
He
of it,
kicked at
and
the
he's
rug for a moment as
re-narrating
if
the
to clear
tale
the dirt off
to
of
this
it and then
goldfish.
circled the rug a few
And
times. Once it was to His
so like
Majesty's high
you're gonna
standard, he
hear
plopped
those
down with a snort
subtle
and his
details
tongue
about like
rolled out
Fenrir's
from
missing his
behind
eye, but when the story actually
In
begins,
moments,
he's
Fenrir
got
was
both of
sound
them.
asleep. I turned back to the last few items and let the joy of my friend's memories wash over me. I picked up a leather eye patch. Embroidered into the patch in gold silk was a man with 2 hawks sitting on his shoulders. Thank you for everything,
Right.
old fool. You were like a grandfather, Odin, I said sadly. To think my people got you so wrong.
Did
I
I
set
not
the eye
have...
patch down gently on
Was there
top of
any
the
others
book.
down here?
My mind wandered to how fierce and scary
I thought
Odin
there
was in
was.
battle. I turned back to the floor and picked up a black bow tie and a small gold bell attached to a red ribbon. Impson, thank you for always watching over Agatha. I spoke.
I always
I placed
like
the
I have a
bow tie
wireless
down
keyboard that
next
likes to
the book
disconnect
and
all the
clutched
time,
the bell between
so I'm
my
always
fingers.
so nervous
Oh,
while holding
Momo.
shift
I mumbled.
that my keyboard's
I
just
rubbed
going to
the
decide
scar
that it's
on
going
my
to disconnect.
cheek. You are completely and forever forgiven. I never thought we would become such good friends. I truly hope you were shown mercy.
That's
I
another
whispered,
thing.
a
Tyrell's
sinking
scar on his
feeling
cheek,
gripped my
talking about
stomach.
best dad.
I felt dizzy.
It's a character
I
we haven't
turned
even met
to make
yet.
my way to my grandfather's chair when my foot kicked the tiny mirror which remained until from the floor. It slid across the cracked, dusty floor of our old Nordic hut and slipped out of sight underneath the wood cabinet. I hadn't noticed the bright white light that now shined brightly
There
from
we
the
go.
glass of the
This'll
mirror.
make it easier
A
to
slight vibration
cobblestone.
emanated from the object for a moment. The light dimmed and the faint hum faded.
broke that.
I slapped the fish bowl as I sat down in the chair. It rolled over and a wave of water fell onto the floor.
I love that
Fenrir
Tyrell's
crawled
just
over and
bullying the
licked it
crap
up.
out of this fish.
I sighed and put the bowl upright back on the table. Water rushed from the gates of the replica Valhalla and rescued the fish. The fish was chillingly calm. It was eerie the way the fish's body reflexively flopped as it waited for water to fill its gills. I hate to admit it, but it's not as fun pushing you around these days. I said playfully towards the fish. You sure you don't want to be friends? I asked seriously. The water around the fish began to boil. The glass, encased
I
in
can't do any
gold,
spoilers
began to glow
about
a
what the
molten
fish
hot
is,
red.
but
The waters rushing from Valhalla was evaporating as
I
soon
just
as
love
it
the
met
visuals of what
atmosphere around
Tyrell's
the
always
fish. The
kinda
bowl
like
shook
bullying it
violently on
and
the table and
all that
slowly
stuff.
lifted itself into the air. It floated slowly up to my face. The fish had a devilish grin under its crimson
Is
flaming
this gonna
eyes.
break that sapling?
An
Yeah.
uncanny set of teeth was revealed to me. Fenrir, grab a behemoth, I said sternly. Fenrir didn't
been
even
so long
bother
since I've
opening his
streamed.
eye. At the threat
got
of me
butterflies.
grabbing my scythe, the
Okay.
fish calmed. The air in the bowl cooled and the waters were allowed to
Yes.
flow. The waters
We can do
refilled
2
the bowl,
cobblestones.
and the
That
fish
should help
slowly sank towards
make
the
it a little
replica
less likely
castle.
that we're gonna break
It began
something back
to sit
there.
on top the highest tower and crossed its fins. Well, Tyrell Larson, a well-spoken voice said. It sounded proud and arrogant. The fish was still smiling and slowly raised its tiny fins in a grand reveal. You were the first to be buried in the graveyard here. You, along with Fenrir, became this village's church grim. How did you die?
I
Why
forgot
did
that
death
the fish
wake
talks
you?
right away.
Tell me, one more time. The fish spoke. Its voice was enchanting. I took my seat and crossed my legs. I folded my arms and took a deep breath. Replay it all you want. Nothing can free you from that prison now. I laughed. Fenrir joined in barking and howling. We'll see, Grim. The fish hissed. He clapped his fins together in a sarcastic way. Start from the day your father sold Fenrir to the church.
He said grim.
Tell me about the day you died. Something.
The
other
church
than
is
humor
grim.
must have
That's a
caught
curse
death's
that
eye. The
we'll
fish's
find out about
voice
later
moved
in the
with
book.
anger. Fine. That is my job after all. I said, rolling my eyes. I locked them onto the fish and recounted the events of that day. I was 15 when I died. We had just celebrated Fenrir's 4th birthday a few nights before. My father had seemed a little more cheerful
Tyrell's
than
dead
normal.
in this
My mother was in the
introduction
kitchen
with the
making
fish.
us some rabbit stew. It was Fenrir's favorite meal. To steal from my plate. I remember we laughed a lot that night.
I almost
Fenrir
ran
and
off the
I
side.
went to bed with full bellies and renewed energy. It wasn't often a day would be bright around here, and we enjoyed them while we could. I remember having a very vivid dream that night. I was walking through the meadow where I first met Fenrir as a pup. It was daytime and the
Stupid
sun
double
reflected
click.
magnificent lights from the stone in the center. The stone had raw gold and silver and other precious metals that poked from the grains of its coarse shell. Countless gems cast every color from the rainbow onto the trees. I walked mesmerized by the sight. Suddenly, the light was gone.
It's a little
The clearing
leggier than
was
I was
shrouded
expecting
in
it to be.
black.
That's unfortunate.
I heard what sounded like fingers snapping and the stone lit up again. There was no sun or stars to cast a light. The stone was illuminated like a lit candle. The colors danced and flashed around the meadow. The snapping became rhythmic, and I felt my feet move on their own. I began to dance shyly to myself, entranced by the sound. The
These are a little
colors
stronger.
cheered me
Oh,
on, and the
that-
shyness began to melt away
That
from
ran through
me.
those
The
3
snapping
cobblestones so
stopped and
quickly.
pitch black darkness again enveloped the meadow, but only for a moment. The stone lit up again suddenly, but this time it only cast a single gentle white light towards a cluster
I wasn't
of
paying attention.
trees.
This is where
Slowly
Tyrell's
the
talking about
snapping
how he
picked
met
up
Fenrir.
again, and I heard birds begin to sing. I could hear drips. As water fell from leaves, there was a faint sound of chirping from squirrels scurrying just out of sight. All the sounds of nature fused together
This
to form
scene
a
is actually
symphony.
based on
I
a real life
became
thing that
enveloped in the
happened
music,
where
and any
Buddy and I
nervous
went
feelings I had
exploring
vanished. I danced
the
without a care in the
creepiest forest
world.
in
I didn't
Chicago
even see the woman dance her
at
way
like 2
into the
a.m.
clearing from behind the lit-up trees. She made her way towards me. She danced with the grace of an angel. Every detail of her movements was carefully choreographed.
Obviously, this part
She
didn't
grabbed
happen.
me by
Just
the
the
hand,
squirrels chirping
and we
and like
spun around the clearing.
that mysterious
She
feeling
guided
of
me
there
through a
being
dance. My
something
body
in a
just
clearing.
seemed to know the moves too. I was overwhelmed with emotions. This was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She was short, 5 foot 5 inches. Her skin was very pale. She was thin and wore a long, beautiful laced white dress. It flowed with her movement as she moved. Her eyes were a dark crimson red and looked into mine with the sorrow of an unfathomable number of horrors. A single red thread wove in and out of her flesh from the top of her head down her face and neck. It laced her skin shut on her chest just above her chest. It danced and snaked its way in and out of the white fabric of her dress. My imagination wandered as I followed the thread, down her legs. She was barefoot yet danced unscathed. She leaned in and whispered something in my ear before I woke up. She was in so much pain, yet she grabbed me by the hand and guided me.
Oh.
I laughed. I didn't notice while recalling the dream, but tears were streaming down my face. I looked at
a
the
lot of
fish and looked
inspiration
back at me
for
puzzled.
this
Fate,
woman,
you
Faith,
whore of a sister, what
was
have
from
you done?
Juzo
The fish
in
asked.
Tokyo Ghoul,
His voice,
with like the
just
red
for a
stitches all
second,
up her body.
sounded shaky. He regained his composure, and the smile returned across the fish's face. I bet you had your first wet dream that night.
In a
The
different
fish
pattern,
laughed.
though.
I heard Fenrir bark quietly to himself, as if laughing. Oh ha, 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 I said as coldly as possible. I couldn't help but blush. Damn fish. He can
don't
never know he
know
was
if we
right.
get a second
I thought. The fish spoke again.
piece of
Tyrell,
water
please,
from that chest that's
continue.
over on the desert
What
island.
happened
I hope
after your
so.
wet dream? The fish smiled.
Because
I continued
the plan
my
I
tale.
have
I woke up
for this
earlier
one
than
block
normal.
kind
It
of
was
needs
weirdly
an
silent
infinite
in the
water
house, and
source to
Fenrir
make
wasn't
it.
laying next to my bed. I snapped out of my sleepy morning fog and had an idea of what happened. I had been hearing rumors in the village about how the priests were looking for a great
Let's
beast.
try
They had a belief. The
turning this down
first
a little
soul
bit.
to
Maybe
be
that'll
buried in
help.
dirt and sealed by a stone would be cursed. They would
A
become the
little bit.
church's grim and would be forced to protect their lands until the trumpets of Judgment Day. My father was our village chief and was close with the priests. My mind
Don't wanna
raced
lose
and I jumped out of bed.
everything
I
all at
ran
one
out
go.
the door and grabbed a sickle used for weeding. It was
Alright.
leaning against an ancient stump. I ran through the village. I was so focused on my
really
fears that I
nervous that
didn't
this is
notice
gonna
if
be
anyone
it.
else was
We're
awake
gonna lose
yet.
all of our
I
cobblestone
ran
for
until
this.
I got to the church.
My
Construction
wireless
was
keyboard
finished,
at any
and the
second can
graveyard
decide to
needed a
unplug
soul.
itself, and then
I got
we're
to the
hosed.
gate which led into the graveyard and saw my parents. They were standing a few feet away from Fenrir, next to a hole dug in the ground.
We also have to keep an
Two
eye on the
priests
minimap
were
because we don't want
holding
to
Fenrir, who
touch
wasn't
that
resisting
block
at
of
all.
sand.
The
Otherwise,
good boy
all of
trusted
our
my parents,
like we'll lose
and they
it.
led him to
It'll
his
activate the
death.
gravity and
Fury
it'll fall
fueled
into the
my
void.
steps, and I
And we
ran
definitely don't want that
faster.
happening.
I remember calling out just as the head priest slit Fenrir's throat. The blood-curdling howl I heard
I'm getting nervous. We're getting
disoriented
close.
me.
Oh,
I tripped
actually,
and landed face first onto the
I think
blade
we're good.
of my
I don't
sickle.
think we're gonna touch
I
it,
remember
actually.
hearing my parents call out as I felt my body be enveloped in blood. The last thing I saw
We might be
was
at the
Fenrir
perfect
desperately
distance. I
trying
want to be
break
one block
free to
away
come
so I can
rescue
jump
me.
over there.
I don't know if it was the sickle piercing my throat, or if a lump formed from how heartbreaking
so
it was to
close.
watch
So
Fenrir
close.
struggle. I told the beautiful black fish before wrapping up. For what feels like an eternity
another
I
ice?
slept. Except
Oh, there
was no
wasn't.
thought,
No.
no dreaming, no consciousness,
So
just sleep. I don't know how long
I
it had
don't
been, but the sound
know
of laughter woke me up. Tripped and impaled
if we're gonna be
yourself
able
on the
to
farming
build
tool. You were
what I was
flailing
thinking
and
of
yelling
building.
like you truly believed you were some sort of hero. The laughing grew louder. I
might have
blinked
to
and
wait
looked
for
upon the face of the most
later.
breathtaking
Actually, you
man
know what
I
we
had ever
can
seen.
do is
His
plan
skin
for
was
that.
paler than the moon, and he stood tall and slender. Long, lanky arms
We
reached
don't have
out
enough
and
wood to build
pointed
a
at
ladder
me.
yet.
He was dressed in all black and
We
wore what
might.
looked like half of a human skull on the right side of his face. His right eye pierced through the socket of the skull. A crimson red, staring at the man filled me with curiosity. The man began to saunter around flamboyantly and continued to laugh. "Oh, Fenrir, I'm coming."
The character
"Oh
in my
no,
book,
am I
not
tripping? Oh,
the actual topic.
Dead.
Death sucks.
Oh no, unresolved
when it
mummy
happens in
and
real
daddy
life.
issues. However will I solve them now? Oh, the tragedy." He leaned back and laughed even louder.
Thank you.
He brought his bony hand up and covered his mouth. I could see his cheeks blushing behind it. I finally pulled myself together and spoke out to him. "Who are you?" I asked. "Names, death," he replied. "And you just died the funniest death I have ever seen. I just had to wake you up to shake your hand."
That's how Tyrell and Death first meet. Death woke Tyrell up because the fact that he died while trying to be all heroic. Death found him easy.
Floated towards me like it had earlier. The water was boiling completely now. The black fish sat on the top
there we
of the
go.
Valhalla
So
replica.
we'll just do
His
this for
red
now,
eyes
and
pierced
then
me
when
to
it
my
comes time to
core.
it, I think
"Are
I
you
should be
sitting
able to make
cross-finned?" I laughed.
what I'm
I
thinking
walked
of
over
with
and
that
plucked
much
the bowl
space
out of the
underneath.
air. I
We
set
should be
him
able to
back down
automate
on
that
the
one
table.
block at some
A bit
point.
dramatic, don't you
I
think?
think we have
I
the mods
laughed.
for it.
The fish appeared to sigh
I'm
and
using the
then relax.
Pixelmon with
He began to
technology
swim
mod.
again, and the boiling
So it
water
doesn't have anything
calmed.
too
"Fenrir,
crazy in
let's
it, but
go
I
for a walk,"
think we
I
should be able to do
whistled.
some cool
I
stuff.
grabbed the fishbowl and placed it back into the leather pouch
I really
kept on my
like
belt.
using this mod pack.
Swim
I don't
back
play
and
on the server,
relax.
but
We're
they're really good at
about to tell you
updating
the
it.
story
I've been
of
on the
how we
server
ended
before, and they
your
seem
reign
pretty nice.
and broke God's endless cycle. One more time, I said joyfully. I walked over to the dining room table and gathered the items
I
and
think we'll
placed
get a couple
them
of
into the leather
things.
pouch.
Hopefully,
I noticed the mirror was missing and panic washed
we get
over
some
me.
chests and
I
maybe
looked all
start
over and
expanding
finally
things.
found
Oh,
the mirror
like that.
underneath a cabinet.
Can we?
As I reached to grab
Level
it, my
46,
finger
there's no way we're
brushed the
beating
glass
that.
surface.
If we can
A
expand
dim light
some like
appeared.
territory to
The
start
mirror
getting some
reflected a
Pokemon to
memory,
spawn,
as clear as a
then
picture.
maybe we'll.
I stood
Ooh,
smiling with
okay.
my scythe on my
Maybe
back
we'll
and
do
my
better
arm around a very
once
pretty
you start getting
girl.
some stuff.
A red-haired woman with a large
That was an
witch hat
amazing
stood
chest.
next
Holy
to
crap.
us. She was holding the leather-bound book. A short green imp in a tuxedo stood next to her with perfect posture. Behind all of us stood a giant of an old man with long white
This
hair
first
and a long
time we're
white
meeting
beard.
Agatha?
He wore a leather eye patch over his left eye.
Am I
A
shuffling
black and
my
a white
playlist here?
hawk sat perched on each of his broad muscular shoulders. On the other side
No.
of me in the picture stood Father Philip and
Oh,
Sister Grace.
talked about the people in
They
the
both
picture.
stood strong
Haha.
and proud with their
Never mind.
coffins strewn
I'm an
across
idiot.
their backs. In front of all of us sat Fenrir. On one side of Fenrir
Down
sat
here,
a cute
Wooly
brown
Wooloo.
cat, which wore the red ribbon with the golden bell attached.
We're probably gonna have
On
to
the
end up
other side
going
of Fenrir,
down
resting its head
below.
on his shoulder, sat
Can
a beautiful
I-
white wolf with red eyes.
Oh, yeah, that
I'm
helps.
doing this for you, guys.
We'll have to go
I
up every
said
once in a while in
confidently.
order to collect
I threw
things.
my green cloak over my shoulders and tied it tight. I looked down at the fish fiercely and winked. Let me tell you about what happened after I became a church grim, I said proudly. Fenrir barked and we walked out of the front door.
That's the end of chapter 1. Tyrell bullying the fish is now over, and that's
I'm
supposed to be a
dead,
prologue,
I
so that
asked,
might not
the
even make it into
strange,
the end book.
Beautiful man. I rushed my hands to my throat. My mind was racing.
But
as
now
the
Tyrell's,
memories of what happened replayed.
Like, this could be the
Laughter
start of the
sang
book,
out
basically.
and echoed through the empty graveyard. My mind flashed back to a few moments ago. I remember running
Dang, I'm getting a
desperately through my
ton
village.
of
My
overpowered
knuckles were
items
white
from these
how
chests.
tightly I gripped an old,
Sadly,
rusted
nothing I
farming
really want,
sickle.
though.
I had a horrible ache in my stomach as the sight of the freshly
see.
built church
Oh, no.
came into
Oh,
view.
no.
I burst into the graveyard, quickly spotting
Oh,
the
that's
priest.
a bummer.
He was standing over Fenrir.
Oh,
he was a wolf and
no.
my best friend.
Oh, no.
The priest slit his throat. A loud, blood-curdling howl
Well,
died out. The sound made me lose my footing. I heard
Good thing we have a one
screams,
block.
and then there was
with
nothing.
a bunch of items
For an
up here.
exceedingly long time, I slept. I do not remember dreaming, or any form of
We
consciousness.
can at least make
It
another
felt like,
pickaxe.
for a time, I
don't
didn't
really need
even
one right now.
exist. There was simply nothing. until there was something. A laugh. A boisterous enchanting laugh. I am coming, Fenra. Oh no. Am I too late? You tripped and pierced your own throat with that rusted sickle. The beautiful man slapped his knee and laughed harder. The sound of the voice was inviting, and it pulled my focus
We're in
towards
a
his
wooded
face.
mountains area.
His skin was paler than the moon,
So
and his
we're gonna
eyes
get a
were
lot
deep
of
crimson red. He had a
like
mysterious
geodudes and
toothy
stuff,
smile.
which is good for a
He had a
rally,
chunk of a human
but not
skull
good
over
as
his
far as
left
like
eye.
item drops
He was very
go.
slender and tall. He had straight wispy black hair that fell to his
We
shoulders.
need something to
He
start
had a
getting
funny
us like
foreign accent.
apricorns.
He
Although
wore
we
a
were
black
getting
suit,
some great
like
balls and
ones
ultra
I've
balls
seen
from
the more
those chests, so
important
maybe we
priests
just need to
wear.
focus
A
on the
tall
one
hat
block.
sat upon his head. He was
And then we
mesmerizing.
can get a crap ton more dirt,
Larson,
and that'll help
age
us kind of like
15.
expand out our
Fenra,
island.
Larson, age 5, first death of coordinates. The man trailed off. He began pacing back and forth in the snow. He seemed light-footed. A loud bark interrupted my thoughts, and I quickly scanned the area. Fenra had been sitting next to a cut square stone. I found my courage at the sight of my old friend and spoke out. Who are you? What do you mean? Where are we? I asked. My voice was shaky. I was afraid that I already knew all the answers. The man stopped pacing and slammed his book shut. He flicked his wrist and
This
the black
is when
feathered
Tyrell
quill he was
is
using
first dead. He's in
vanished.
purgatory now.
He turned slowly with his
I
head
was wrong.
cocked to one side.
I thought
His red
the
eye
book
burned
or
through
chapter
the
1
chunk
opened up
of
with
skull.
him
The heat of his gaze made
recalling
me uneasy.
his like
The
last
man
moments
stepped
of life.
forward and threw his hands up in the air in a grand, flamboyant gesture. Me? I am Death. He grinned. Death folded his lanky hand across his chest and bowed. I was surprised his tall hat did not fall from his head. Death sauntered towards Fenra, his hips swung hypnotically. He got to the wolf's side and rested his hand on its head. Death began to scratch the fur onto Fenra's head. Where are
I guess
we?
you can probably
I
save
asked.
those as
Death
actual
knelt and
food
wrapped his
because you have the
arms
one
around
block,
his knees. He leaned
which
over and
already
whispered
gave us the
something in
melon.
Fenra's
So
ear. The entire time he gave me a weird,
just a
judgmental
little bit
look.
more of this.
Fenra barked and Death nodded his head slowly. Death shot up and did a bunch of backflips before landing and thrusting his hands into the air. Tyrell Larson, you are in purgatory. Technically you should not be awake right now, but I just had to meet you. I am a big fan. He smiled and began to chuckle into his
Get
hand.
out of here, man.
What do you mean we are in purgatory? I asked. I looked around frantically and recognized the graveyard. The church was the same. I was pretty sure that I was still in my village. Death burst into laughter and placed his hands on his belly. Best to think of purgatory as the
Dang
other
it,
side
every
of
time
a
I get an
mirror,
EXP
a
share, I
reflection of the
die.
living world. He laughed. I clapped my hands
I
and
got
knelt
nothing else.
forward.
I got nothing else.
Fenra came running
Oh
at
well,
top speed.
we got the one block.
I embraced him
We would be so
tightly and he
screwed
licked
if we
my
didn't have the
face.
one block
Death
right now.
made a sound of admiration and interrupted our reunion. All right, Tyrell, I must get back to work. I have to put you back to sleep now. He shrugged his shoulders and then began to stretch. Put me back to sleep. What does that mean? I asked. I stopped petting
Can't
Fenra
believe I
and
did that
stood up.
again.
I looked
That's
Death
twice
up and
that's
down.
happened.
I was sizing him up. He was not very intimidating for being the Grim Reaper. Death sighed and put his hand into a pouch in his pants. He pulled out a thin slate of obsidian and held it up to his ear. Hey, can you cover me? He asked. A moment of silence and he spoke again. Yeah. He's calmer than expected, like you said he would be. Death sighed and mumbled into the chunk of obsidian. I looked down at Fenra in confusion. Okay. Goodbye, Death said. He placed the obsidian back into the pouch. His flamboyant demeanor faded and he rubbed his fingers against the bridge of his nose. Look, T, can I call you T? He barely asked before he continued. His voice faded out as he mumbled something to himself. I usually try to keep this short. Death waved his hand, and a plume of black smoke revealed an extravagant hand-carved chair. The wood was stained the darkest shade of black I had ever seen.
I love the
He
visual
sat
of
down in the
Death's
chair
chair.
with an audible thump, and continued talking to me. You tripped and pierced yourself while convinced you were some sort of hero. That kind of death is exactly the type of thing that gets me going. I laughed so
Just because
hard
I'm
that
going
I
to screw
just
this up
need to
and
wake
die, I
you
know
up and
it. We'll
shake
go
your
ahead
hand.
and leave everything
However,
in here.
times are up. I need to put you back to sleep until Judgment Day. Death said.
Oh wait,
He
I'm an
waved his
idiot.
hand in a circle
How
as
did
if
we
he were
just
bored
die?
with
I should be
speaking to
doing
me
this over
and
here.
wanted to rush things along. What about Fenrir? I asked. Death dropped his hand and looked at me eyes wide for a moment. I tell you all of this and you're worried about a wolf? Death asked puzzlingly.
Excuse me, Tauros.
He is my best friend. Is he
Tauros?
going to be
Tauros?
okay after the trauma of having his throat
Tauros.
slit? That betrayal.
Tauros.
I was genuinely
Tauros.
worried
Please.
about my friend.
Please,
I
sir.
ran my hands through his soft fur and a deep longing
Okay,
my chest.
sir,
I
come
did
on.
not want to lose him again. Death got up and the chair vanished in another
I swear,
plume
that's
of
how it
black
goes.
smoke.
Are you kidding
He
me?
walked towards me, and that devilish toothy grin appeared back on his face.
That's how it is in real
He
life too,
clapped
I
his hands
swear.
gently
Every
as he
time I'm
walked.
trying to get in
His
somewhere,
voice had new
just
life and his
the most
personality returned
inconsiderate,
to that
bowl of a
flamboyant
dude
attitude-free sway.
gets in the
Fenrir
way.
technically died before you. Last brain signal tends to be a little longer in humans than in dogs. The fine print will get you every time. But because of this misfortune, Fenrir is these lands' fine church grim. What's a church grim? I asked.
A church grim is somebody who is the first to be buried in a Christian graveyard. Oh no, fire is gonna destroy my tree before I get to it. But a grim is like the first soul to be buried in a graveyard is cursed with this grim curse, and that means that they have to spend the rest of eternity protecting the rest of the souls that get buried in that graveyard, either until Judgment Day or until they themselves get killed.
Literally, no idea when this shift
There's
ends.
a lot of demons in
Protect. I
purgatory,
barely got the
and
word
therefore
out
there's a
before
lot
death
of
interrupted.
dangers in
Demons,
purgatory.
the fallen angels,
How
roam
are there so
purgatory.
many
They hunt
Tauruses? Like,
souls.
are you kidding me?
Yada yada. Look, kid, I am really running out of time here.
I bet you they keep
It's
spawning.
bedtime. I had not noticed how close he
Oh,
had got.
they're categorized
He
as
was right in
cows,
front of me,
and
his
Torchics are
hand was inches
categorized
from
as
my face.
chickens.
I
So
panicked
the
and
one block
shouted
is
out,
spawning these
"My God."
entities,
I yelled.
but since
I
I've got the
jumped
Pixelmon
backwards and shoved Death
installed,
away
it
with
is
all my
overriding
strength.
them to be
Fenrir attacked
Taurus,
and put Death on the
Torchic.
wrist. My,
That would
oh
explain
my,
Tepig.
this is
He must be
interesting.
pigs.
Death smiled and laughed. This time it was
It'll be
eerie
interesting
and
to see what
sounded
else we get
murderous.
spawning all over
His
our island
eyes
from
were
that.
wide,
We might want
and
to
his head was
suicide
tilted to
often,
the side. Come to
just so
me.
we don't get too many
Leviathan,
entities on our island,
he
because then
spoke.
nothing else
The
is going to
sky grew
spawn.
dark, and clouds formed
That's
in the
unfortunate, because
sky.
then we're never going to
Lightning
actually, like,
flashed and thunder crashed.
have levels or
A meteor
anything.
came rocketing down and crashed into the ground. The force sent me flying tens of feet backwards into a tree.
Grab
I
one of
saw
our
Fenrir
many,
get
many
launched in
crafting
the opposite
tables.
direction. A large crater had formed where we were just standing.
Lose one of our many,
and
many
Death was
crafting
floating
tables.
in the air above it. He raised his right hand in front of him and a large obsidian scythe rose from the depths of the flaming pit. Dying hurts worse the second time. Death shrieked a laugh like a banshee. He was terrifying now. Death flexed his back and 8 beautiful large black wings emerged from his back. He rose higher into the air and his wings blocked out the moon. I was mesmerized. I saw Fenrir get up and
excuse you.
shake it off from the other
I thought
side
I
of the
did 2
pit.
of these.
I turned my attention back to Death and focused on the beautiful black blade of his weapon. It shined beautifully yet tragically. In the reflection danced thousands of tormented faces. They took turns coming in and out of focus and they were pushed by an invisible current. Behind the transparent faces I could vaguely make out a faint serpent. It was weaving and swimming with all the faces in the invisible current. The scythe's blade was 3 feet long and had a width of 7 inches at the thickest part. The handle of the weapon was an ancient wood, cracked and worn from an unfathomable age. Silver vines crept up
I
the
wasn't sure if
brown
they were
wood of the
talking about
handle
the
and
silver
merged
scythe
with the
or
obsidian
Death's
blade.
scythe.
Amethyst gems shone like
But the wooden
grapes
handle,
from the
that's
vines.
Death's.
Foolish
Leviathan.
boy. Death spoke. Before the words had even reached my ears I was flying backwards at an alarming speed. I felt my back crash into a spruce tree. The branches caught me and felt comforting from the force. My forehead was burning. I rushed my hands to the spot and rubbed intensely. The sound of Death's words finally reached my ears. The wind was knocked out of me, and I felt as if I was going to get wet myself. I flicked you from here and the force of the air sent you flying. I heard Death say. He was laughing again. I looked up and Death was in front of me again, his hand held out to help me up. A black leather glove was now covering his porcelain skin. I grabbed and pulled myself up. I brushed myself off. I heard Fenrir bark and saw him running around the pit to come meet us. I looked around and I couldn't see the obsidian scythe anywhere. Death's wings were also nowhere to be found. Sorry about that, You two were the first mortals to attempt attacking me. I reacted a bit aggressively. Death removed his top hat and bowed again.
I wanted Death
His
to
dark
be a
hair
very
covered his
charismatic
face.
character.
Fenrir had rejoined us and jumped up and down
But he
excited.
constantly has to
He was
remind you
unharmed.
why he's the real
Death
deal.
gathered himself and called Fenrir over to be scratched. As I was saying, this good boy has to stay here in purgatory with me. He sounded sad at the words. No need to worry, T. As deeply as you care for Fenrir, I care for all my animal grim friends. He said reassuringly. He sat down and played with Fenrir. Everything had been happening so fast I did not have time to think about it. I remember the rumors around my village warning about the priests. The whispers said that they were looking for a great beast to sacrifice and bury in the graveyard. Some rituals regarding protection and safety. I never would have thought that the rumors would directly impact me and Fenrir. I realized the meaning behind Death's words. I wouldn't want Fenrir to be stuck alone in purgatory for who knows how long. Death, sir, I steadied myself and spoke confidently. Please let me swap places with Fenrir and serve as Grim instead. Death stood up and the smile spread across his face again. He laughed
What are you
and
doing,
clapped his
Dabu?
hands. That annoying brat. She is always right. His grin widened. Death walked towards me, removed the black leather glove, and presented his hand to me. I was hesitant and recoiled at the thought of shaking Death's hand. Do not worry, unless I intend to harm you. My touch is harmless. Death smiled warmly. I grasped his hand, and he pulled me into a tight embrace. He towered over me and must have had to fold his body to hug me. Since you made me laugh so hard because of your pointless death, and for your bravery in attacking me,
How is it still
and because my
snowing?
sister said so. She is
It's
so
like
annoying.
spring.
Not as annoying as my brothers though. Actually, I hate my entire family. I should try therapy. Death trailed off and began pacing around again.
Got some rare candies?
Excuse me. I
No
spoke.
EXP share though, so I'm not gonna die this
Joined
time,
me in getting his
unfortunately.
attention. Oh sorry. Death laughed and continued his speech. I will let you stay awake and assist Fenrir in protecting these lands. Be warned though, you are not the Grim and your soul is very vulnerable. If you get devoured by a demon and remain inside of a demon, come Judgment Day, well, that is game over, baby. Death
That is
snapped
game
his
over,
fingers.
baby.
I did not even have to think about my decision. I shouted louder than I meant to, and it echoed throughout the area. I accept. Please let me stay with Fenrir. I yelled. Fenrir howled into the air and joined my cries. Death laughed again and shook his head from side to side. You really are something else, kid. I don't be back in these parts for some time now, but I hope you are still here when I come visit next. Death said. He began to stretch again. A crow's cry rang out and sent a chill down my spine. Who is a good boy? See you soon, friend. Death reached down and pet Fenrir one last
What do we
time.
got for dirt?
Good luck,
We got
kid.
nothing. It's
Death
all up
grinned
top.
and looked at
Oh,
me
there's
once
so many
more.
Pokemon.
His crimson red eye seemed
Oh.
compassionate as it peered through the chunk of skull.
There
Before I
wasn't
could
that many
say
Pokemon
anything
actually.
else,
However,
I
we
blinked,
should
and
plug
Death
this
was
up.
gone.
That's
I
a
sighed and walked over to join
dangerous
Fenrir. I
work
continued
hazard?
past him back
Dangerous work
towards the
hazard?
village and made my way towards home. Tree was a reflection.
Uh-oh.
My home should be just as I
Uh-oh.
left it. I thought as we walked. I tried to make sense of everything Death had said. We made our way through our village, and I rubbed my hand over my neck. I couldn't feel anything from where the sickle had pierced me. I realized I wasn't in much pain from crashing into that tree. I had so much to think about, but all I wanted to do was crawl into bed and cry myself to sleep. Fenrir and I made it to our hut and everything were just as I expected. Normal looking. It was strange. I'm exhausted, buddy. Let's try to figure some more of this out tomorrow. I yawned and stretched. Fenrir barked and laid on the floor next to my bed. I stared up at the ceiling and let my mind wander. Death was so cool, I thought,
Death was so
as
cool.
I fell asleep. I tossed and turned all night and morning had come. My mind was racing, trying to go over the events that got me killed, and the words death spoke to me. Fenra was restless on the floor next to my bed. I was just about to give up sleep and speak out to Fenra, when a loud roar snapped me from my thoughts. Fenra shot off the ground and growled deeply. Demons? I asked. Lightning shot down my spine at the word. I was paralyzed with fear. I don't know where this mysterious courage came from, but I threw the blankets off me and ran out of the hut. Fenra was chasing after me.
So
Another loud roar rang out and I felt my skin crawl. It's coming.
I didn't mean to
from the
send Rowlet
graveyard,
out to
I said
battle.
frantically.
I
We
meant to
ran
just send
towards
him
the sound.
so I could
We
feed
got
him
to
rare
the entrance
candies.
to the
Oh
graveyard and saw
no.
the massive
Can I
crater from the
run?
night
There's no way we
before.
could beat a
It was still
Torchic. I'm pretty sure
flaming from the heat of the
Torchic knows
obsidian
Ember.
side crashing into earth.
Should we try
A
it?
bright shimmer momentarily blinded me.
No, we're not
Another
ready. We're
loud
not ready.
roar
We'll
rang out
die.
and I
And I
confirmed
can't
the
heal
origins.
Rowlet right now.
What's that
We
at the
can't
bottom
escape.
of the crater?
Okay,
I
we have
asked
to fight.
Fenra.
We have
He
to fight.
appeared to shrug his shoulders.
Come on, come on,
I
come on,
took
come
a
on.
moment to admire Fenra's
That
beauty.
did nothing.
He was a gorgeous wolf.
It did no Ember.
Full of
Dang it!
personality.
Gosh,
the
dang
magnificent
it!
creature was 5 feet tall on all fours. The muscles
Well,
bulged under his
so much
fur
for
and his
powering
gaze was
up our
paralyzing.
Rowlet
His
a little
left eye
bit.
was a deep molten gold color. His right eye
And I
was the
can't hit
kindest
things.
shade of sapphire blue.
So it's gonna be a little while
From the
before we
tip
get
of
some
his
more
snout to the end of his tail
to make
was
a bed.
almost 9 feet long. His fur, black like the night,
I don't have any
reflected
revives
with a
or
purple
anything.
hue. His paws could
hey,
rival the largest hands of the
hey.
largest warrior from my village. Truly the greatest of all the great
Can't believe
beasts.
that happened,
His
man.
name was
Can't
Fenra,
believe
and
that
he had been
happened.
my best friend since I was 11. The loudest roar yet nearly knocked me to the ground and grabbed my attention. I looked back at the shimmering object in the center of the crater. It looked like metal of some kind. I examined the areas of the crater that didn't seem hot from the flames and made my way closer to it. It is a scythe, I whispered, loud enough for Fenra to hear. I inched my way close until a
Let's go
voice
see what
yelled
biomes
out,
over here. Does
"Do
it
not dare
change, or are we
touch
still
me,
in wooded
human."
mountains?
The voice called out. It sounded like it came from within the weapon itself. The sound made me jump and I replied, "You're alive?"
You're alive? Oh
I
gosh,
asked.
dang
I
it.
was one of the
I was
first.
distracted
but
by
alas,
the
my
book
boy,
stuff.
Neither of us are alive. The voice replied. I was bewildered and I admired the fine craftsmanship of the scythe. Unlike the obsidian scythe that Death showed off last night, this silver scythe only had one face reflected in the blade. It was the head of a blue ox. It blurred and focused in and out of sight as if pushed by an invisible current. I noticed a symbol of an ox stamped.
I thought I was just gonna lose all my wood there. Holy crap, why did I do that?
The blade curved with a length of almost 2 feet. A long silver handle with a deep bend almost made the side look like a crescent.
We're just gonna
moon.
make this
The
pathway a
handle was
little
wrapped with
less
brilliant shimmering
dangerous.
golden grapevines. The ox yelled out and pulled my attention back to him. "Who are you?" I asked curiously. The ox's reflection huffed and seemed offended at my question. "How repulsive. I am the great beast Behemoth." The ox scoffed. All I could see was his face. The blue color of his fur began to look slightly
We have
purple.
some mountains.
The ox's face was
Still
red with anger.
geodudes and stuff
I
like
think
that,
he
though.
noticed I wasn't listening to him. "Behemoth?" I asked. Curiosity took over my mind and my imagination ran wild. As in the behemoth from that tale of Job, I asked. I remembered a priest
A lot of
sharing that
Machops.
story
We do have a
from
chance
the
to get
book
some
he
Charmanders,
carried.
though.
Show me
Charizard's
respect,
another
young
flyer
man.
that'll help us.
The beast stood and blew
No, the
smoke
double.
plumes
Oh
from the
my
side
goodness!
flame. It enveloped me. Don't you dare compare me to that sorry excuse
Why did
of
I
a
not
creature
grab
that
the cactus
stole my
while I had the
name.
chance?
Behemoth roared and his face appeared anguished.
It's
trapped
okay.
inside
We have the one
blade.
block.
If
I
you
think that will
aren't
give us
the behemoth,
cactus.
then who are you? I asked the great beast. I reached out and tried to grasp the handle of the scythe.
And we didn't
A
even
gust of
find
wind
a
rushed from the
cool
weapon and swayed
biome.
my
Might as well
stance.
waste.
I
No, we
started
shouldn't
to
waste
feel
our wood.
warm. Standing in the
We
center
almost
of
just
the
ran
flaming
off anyways,
crater,
though.
I felt beads of sweat run down the back of my neck. Behemoth steadied
Well,
his
it's dead.
composure
I was
and
gonna say,
spoke
we
some
could probably
more.
beat that level
I
5
am the
Machop.
Behemoth, the hand of God used to mold the universe and create all the land on all the stars and planets in our universe. I ran and roamed freely throughout space. Every step would create rock and molten land would form from the friction of my steps. Mountains rose in my wake and canyons formed from cracks the weight of hooves. The blue ox looked at me proudly and impatiently as if waiting for something. Before I could speak, the ox continued. The most beautiful creature chased me for what seemed like an eternity. She was this large finned serpent. She dove and burrowed into the ground, racing behind me. It frustrated me while we were alive. She would bring water with her everywhere she went, and I thought she was ruining my perfect sculptures. Her name was Leviathan, Behemoth said. A deep sorrow took over his expression and he continued. We played this cat and mouse game for eons. Lands I made and oceans she formed crumbled to dust and evaporated countless times. Before death entered the universe, I don't know what happened, but one day he appeared in front of my path. A bold decision, I thought, and I tried to run him down.
It's my first
He
live
raised his
stream, so
hand,
bear
and
with
the
me.
second I touched his skin, I was transported into this weapon. The great beast clunked his head against the blade, and it vibrated with a long ring. What happened to Leviathan? I asked. I was starting to feel uncomfortable. I heard Fenrir whimper and bark as if he was also dying to hear how this story ends. The ox pulled himself together and continued. As soon as I was pulled into this prison, I was shown a reflection of Leviathan. It was the first time, in all of creation, I had noticed her. She was breathtaking. The way her long slender body dove and wove in and out of my sculptures. Her water cascaded and flowed with my cracks and my mountains. They didn't ruin them. They enhanced them. I never appreciated her beauty before now, and it was too late. I called out to her not to attack death, but she touched his hand. She was sucked into the obsidian scythe you saw last night, Behemoth said. He looked like he was trying not to cry. I felt so bad for him. I tried to gather my thoughts to pull some words out for a condolence. It was too hot though. I felt a little lightheaded. I had so much I wanted to ask the beast, but I could not find the words. I was hot. It's getting warm, isn't it? I asked. The behemoth roared and more blue smoke shot out from the ground that the handle of the scythe had pierced. Behemoth laughed and roared. Thank you for listening to my history lesson. Now be gone, young man, Behemoth said. Flames and blue smoke rose and burned hotter. The intense heat nearly made me pass out. The lack of sleep wasn't helping me with stamina. Right before I lost consciousness, I felt the familiar brush of Fenrir's body and I collapsed into it. I regained focus and watched as Fenrir jumped. He lifts both of us out of this massive crater now engulfed in flames with a single leap. We landed and I jumped off Fenrir's back. Thanks, bud. Good boy. I praised him. I turned back to the crater and could make out Behemoth laughing in the reflection. He roared out again.
Okay.
Run away, mortals, and never show your face before me again. He warned. Fenrir and I looked at each other and turned to make our way towards the church. What a jerk. No wonder death left him behind. I told Fenrir, let's go check out the church. I said as we made our way in. It was my first time seeing the inside of the church.
I mean, that's the basic concept of what I'm going to be going for this one block is eventually we can make it so that when the Pokemon and stuff spawn, it'll push them down here. And I think because of the technology mods, we have stuff for like automating and killing monsters and stuff. But even if that doesn't happen, we can still block it off, make kind of like our own kind of grinder, or I just lost my bucket. I just lost my bucket. Gosh, dang it.
A small square room of equal size. Each room had an extremely comfortable looking bed.
How not to play
Minecraft
Minecraft
hung a small
skyblock.
square of glass framed in wood. I walked over to one of the rooms and gazed at my reflection. The sight made me gasp. Fenrir, I yelled. He came running
I
into
know how
the
to play
room as
Minecraft, I
fast as I
swear.
got the word out.
It's just been a
I
long
looked the
time.
same as I did before I died. Wait.
Let's see, can
I
we...
stopped my celebration. On my throat
We
was
have
a large
2 great
scar.
balls.
It changed
Let's
the
try to
color of the
get
skin
one
over
of those
my
Tor
Adam's apple.
chicks.
Off-white. It felt difficult to swallow for a moment. I kept the
It's
scar
so
from my
laggy.
death.
That doesn't
I
help
said, rubbing
anything.
the spot. Fenrir howled softly and raised his nose towards the ceiling.
I
noticed
think
a scar
I
on
may have
his
bit
throat
off more than my
also.
computer could
You have
chew
won
with this
from where the
super modded
priest slit
Pokemon
your
series.
throat, I said sadly. I ran my hands through Fenrir's fur and felt sorry for a moment. My thoughts trailed off to how great we were at hunting. Memories of Fenrir and I wrestling older Viking in the village and winning. All these great accomplishments and grand things we had ahead of us, snuffed out in a moment. A thought flashed in my mind from moments before. Fenrir, you jumped like 50 feet into the air. What was that? I recalled the feeling of flying. Fenrir barked and kicked the wall behind him with his hind leg. It exploded into chunks of wood. Fenrir barked and jumped up and down proudly. Whoa, good boy, I said, bursting with excitement. I wonder if I can do that. I balled my hand into
If you
a
guys
fist
hear a
and
cat
punched the mirror.
meowing and it
It
sounds like
vanished
it's
as
in
the wall
distress,
splintered and
it's
cracked, then fell to the
my
ground.
senior cat is
Not as
playing with our
impressive as yours,
kitten.
but holy crap. I joined Fenrir and jumped.
He sounds like he's
We were so
devastated, but
excited
he's
at this
having
found
fun, I
strength.
promise.
Come on, boy, let's go
They're
see
grooming
what we
each
can
other
really
right now.
do. I grinned. Fenrir chirped and squinted his eyes towards me. I knew the look upon his face well. The usual spot. Race ya. I laughed and dug my feet
I guess
into
we
the
can't really
wood
do
floor.
anything until we
It
get some
splintered beneath
iron.
me. Go. It sounded like Fenrir barked
And we
the
also
word
just
and we
need
were
stuff
off.
to expand
Our
our...
destination was a corner
I
of
guess
our
we have to find a
family's
good
land where we
biome.
had been chopping down
Ideally,
trees
we would
for
like to find
generations. My
some normal type
grandfather's words
Pokemon. I
echoed
think
in
normal
my
type
mind in my
Pokemon
father's
can
voice.
drop apricorns.
Always replant 2
Apricots?
trees.
Apricorns.
If you cut one down, I
Apricots.
thought. I couldn't help but let out a chuckle. I have a
Apricot?
feeling we will be
I
planting
don't remember. I
lots
can
of
never remember
trees
which
after
one's real and
this.
which one's
I
fake.
told Fenrir. He let out
The
a
Pokemon
chirp as he
Abra.
jogged lightly
Not the
next to
Pokemon
me.
Abra.
I hadn't been trying to run and I realized Fenrir hadn't tried to even race me. I remember gritting my teeth as I took off sprinting at full effort. A cloud of dust whipped in the wind behind me. I moved faster than I expected,
All
and
my
I
stuff
crashed
is being
into a
pushed
fence
down
from
here.
the path. I heard Fenrir bark his annoying,
This has
teasing
been the
laugh,
worst
and I
playthrough I've
quickly
ever
got
done in
up.
my life.
Okay. You can still beat me in a race. I laughed. I rejoined Fenrir on the path,
Did
and
all
we
the
walked
items?
towards
Okay,
our
we
hut.
got a couple
My mind was
pieces of
wondering
stuff
at the
and things.
possibilities. I felt so powerful. I got
Oh
slightly
no!
cocky in my abilities and
jeez.
couldn't
Oh
help but
jeez!
trash talk
Oh
Fenrir.
jeez!
He barked back as if replying to all my remarks. We laughed as we walked through a silent, empty replica of the village we grew up in. We were clueless as to what
Let's try to
lurked
make
in the
some more
shadows
safety
just
barriers.
beyond our
Like a
village's
keep
borders.
almost dying
A loud
here.
roar rang out as we entered the gate entering our front yard. We made our way behind our small stone hut and made our way to the forest's edge. Why does Fenrir keep roaring like that? I asked Fenrir. He seemed to shrug. I shrugged off that thought and tuned the sound out. I walked over to a stump and grabbed an axe that had been resting against it. Give me strength, Uncle Baldur. I spoke. I looked over the field. Countless stumps could be seen through the clearing. I took a deep breath and made my way to a large tree in the back of the field. I had been chopping away at this mighty tree's bark for days and haven't even made it halfway through.
Lulu,
I raised
double.
my uncle's axe
Get outta
over
here.
my head and swung
Can
with
it
all
stop
my
raining,
strength.
please?
A loud
Jeez.
cracking sound echoed through my ears like
I feel like
thunder
the biggest
and an
complainer
explosion
right
of
now,
wind
just
launched in the
'cause
direction of my swing. I had
things are being
obliterated the
difficult.
tree in a single swing. Oh my god, Fenrir. Did you see that? I laughed and yelled at the top of my lungs. He was staring at me with his mouth wide open. His large tongue was dangling out from behind his large fangs. I feel incredible.
Wow.
I
Owen
said,
Wilson,
stretching
wow.
more. I set my uncle's old axe down in the grass and walked over to another large tree.
Ooh,
I
Score
gripped
Bunny?
the tree
No, that was
in a big
Spoink.
bear hug and pulled as hard as I could. I heard loud snapping, and I tore the tree from its
Still no
roots with
Torchics.
ease. The unexpected
Flaffy
force
might be
knocked
good.
me
We can get
onto
some
my
wool
butt.
when we get
I tossed
iron.
the tree towards Fenrir, and he quickly dodged
Would
it.
wool be better
Fenrir jumped to
than
the side and in a single flipping motion,
having a strong
kicked the tree
Pokemon?
with his back foot.
I guess
It
Flaff. No,
exploded
we're
into
not in
small
the
wood chips.
landscape for Flaffy to be
Amazing,
beneficial.
I praised. I remembered Fenrir jumping out of the crater.
We're not
Let's
getting a
see
lot of
how
bird
high I can
Pokemon.
jump, I mumbled. Fenrir walked over and sat next to a stump. His gold eye and blue eye were wide with excitement. I knelt and put everything I had into my leap. The motion happened so fast I barely registered that I had sprung up. I blinked and when I opened my eyes, I was soaring above the tree line. I could see an ocean of spruce and pine trees. Beyond the horizon I could just barely make out a large mountain. It loomed over a large valley. My village was nestled next to the sea near the end of this valley. Wow! I gasped. The view of the land surrounding my village was overwhelming. I landed and immediately jumped back into the air. This time I turned my attention to my village. It sat at the edge of a large forest. It was pretty
it's a
large as far
Torchic.
as Viking villages go. Many of the surrounding villages and tribes had long been conquered and
Can we
joined
get just
us.
the Torchic?
A
I don't
large
wanna hit anything
handful
else.
of houses and huts speckled the land.
What do we hit?
They were
Oh,
connected
the
by a
Taurus. Of
long
course we hit the
path of
Taurus.
cobblestone.
So big,
At the
how could you
highest
not hit the
elevation
Taurus?
of the village where our grand
Get
hall
it?
once
Get it?
stood had been torn down.
Oh,
The land
yeah,
was
come on,
given
come on,
over to
get
us
it,
an
get it.
offering to a god we barely understood.
Dang it.
My mind began to
Someday we'll
wander
get
at the
lucky.
memories of the priests and holy knights that wandered the streets and bullied my people. They took so much from us in tax. I mumbled as I fell. I had forgotten that I had jumped. I was in the air for so long. I tumbled to the ground with a thud and Fenrir barked a laugh. Yeah, big shot. Let's see how high you can jump.
The goal
I
is to
said
get a couple of
embarrassed.
hoppers so
Fenrir
then we
lurched
can
down in a stance like he was
kind of
going to
open up
pounce
that
and he
bottom
leapt
area, and then
into
all
the
these
air across the
monsters
field.
or Pokemon will
He
get
flew
thrown
100 yards
kind of
and
into the
landed on
void,
roof
and then
of
the
our
hoppers
home.
will pick up the
My
items.
eyes and mouth widened in amazement. I shouted as loud as I
But
could
for now,
to
we'll
praise
just have to
him.
keep running
Holy
over there.
crap. Great job. I yelled. I heard him howl back proudly.
Excuse me while I
His
scoot
silhouette looked
closer to the
tall and
camera,
mighty in the
jeez.
distance. Stay the boy, I'm coming home. I yelled. Fenrir barked back in agreement. I jogged over and grabbed my uncle's old axe and returned it to the stump at the entrance to our fields. Rest in peace, uncle. I
Woo,
hope you
made it
found
underground.
Valhalla, I said respectfully. I joined
Excuse
Fenrir
me.
at our hut.
Oof.
We jumped and rolled around playfully for a while before deciding to call it a
Better
day.
plug that up
In
for an
all of the
accident.
commotion and fun,
Jeez,
the day
jeez,
had nearly
double.
come to an end. We
Good
had
thing it's
not
raining.
slept a wink the night before,
Holy
and
crap.
I was feeling extremely
Oh, we
drained.
lost our bucket.
Come on, boy. Let's
We
try
can't do
to get
anything
some
about that
rest.
either. Well, I guess we
patted my
can
side and called out to Fenrir. We entered and closed the door,
do some dirt.
unaware of the witch and the tiny
Yeah,
green
we'll block it
demon
for
that
now.
stood by her side.
Although I liked
The
having
two
that
had
light
been
source.
watching us all day. Chapter
There we
3.
go.
The Witch and the Goblin. I
We'll
was
leave it
surprised
for
that
some
we were
light,
able to
and now we
sleep
can't
in
fall into
purgatory.
it as
I was
easily
worried that
anyways.
since we
I'm
were
sure
dead,
I'll still
we
figure out
wouldn't
a
be
way
able
out,
to
'cause
enjoy
I am
the simple
accident
things
prone.
like sleep and food. My stomach growled at the idea of food. I rolled
keep
out of bed
leaning
and
too far
stretched.
back, which
I looked down at the
is
rug which
pointless
Fenrir would
unless
usually be
I
asleep on. He was gone.
turn the
I could
camera
smell
down a little bit
breakfast
better.
coming from
How's
the
that?
kitchen. My stomach sank and excitement welled up inside me. Mum, I yelled. I ran out of my room to see her. I came running into the kitchen. I was relieved that my mom was not dead, but I was sad it was not her. Instead, a small green man stood wobbling on a chair. He wore a small pair of glasses which sat upon a sharp, pointed nose. He was barely 3 feet tall. He had a tiny black top hat on his head with very thin white hair poking out from under it. He wore a tiny tuxedo with a black goatee. He was stirring eggs in a pan alongside sausage. Who are you and where is Fenrir? I growled as I slid to a halt in the dining room. He's fine, I just let him outside to use the restroom. We mean no harm. Now come, join us. A lovely voice with a thick Scottish accent replied. I heard a deliberate cough. It pulled my attention towards a beautiful woman. She sat cockily in a chair at the dining room table. Something
right.
about her captivated me. She was stunning. She had dark tan skin. Strange symbols ran up and down her arms and across her chest. She sat with her legs crossed. and one swayed with impatience. She wore a sleeveless black-laced dress with frills. It was extravagant. She had a large pointy hat with a large brim on her head. Gorgeous fiery red hair cascaded down and curled gently over her shoulders. Her left eye was green like an emerald, and it looked deceptively
Watermelon
innocent.
and a
A
spinner
large
rack.
scar sealed her
That's a new
right eye
Pokemon
shut.
for
It
underground.
ran from slightly above her right eye and ended halfway
So yeah, that
down
must
her
be
cheek. She
because
was
it's a
stunning.
spider.
Ahem, you are in the
Underground
presence of the great with
spawn
Agatha.
spiders?
Stop being
Oh.
rude and introduce yourself.
I
The
wonder
Green
if it's
Man slammed
because
his
of what they
utensil
drop. So
onto
like
the
Taurus
wood
drops
stove.
beef,
The sound
Spider
startled
drops web.
me.
Web.
It snapped me out of my morning days.
That's
I am sorry.
kind of annoying.
My name is Tyrell Larson.
I hate having to
Thank
swap
you for
between
letting
pickaxe
Fenrir
and axe,
outside.
but
Why are you
that's
two in
part
our
of the
home?
one block
I
game mode,
bowed out
baby.
of instinct
Eventually we can
to the
just
pretty lady.
get a powerful
I
pickaxe
cautiously
and
made
power
my
through.
way around the kitchen towards the dining room table. I pulled up a chair and momentarily turned my back towards the woman and the Green Man. I took the opportunity to grab a small sharp knife from the
No,
kitchen
we need a
counter.
stone pickaxe
I nestled
for
into the
iron.
seat and
Oh,
looked
you
at the
guys,
woman
get out
and
of the way.
waited for her response.
Don't
It is a
push me down.
coincidence that we are here. We were passing through this valley when we witnessed the sky
Right.
opened and a large
geez, this
ball
is
of
scary.
fire fall out of it. We felt the earth
Oh, no,
shake
no, no, no,
as it
no,
landed
no,
near
no.
here and
Dang
knew
it.
we had to check it out. The woman
Don't
said
fall, don't fall.
calmly.
Oh, no,
My
oh, no,
mind
oh, no,
flashed
oh, no,
to the
oh, no,
image of
oh,
the
no,
side that
oh,
was sitting in the bottom of the crate. Who are you two and what do you want? I asked. The Green Man cleared his
I was
throat
just
and
trying
jumped
to
down
break a
from the chair
hole
while
so the
holding
monster,
pan
like
with
the
eggs
Pokemon
and
would fall in
sausage.
and I could get the
Forgive our
items.
intrusion.
Damn
My
it.
name is Impson, and that is Agatha. I hope that breakfast will make up for us entering without permission.
I tell
He said
ya.
while he scooped some eggs
We
onto a
should
couple
not
of plates. Forgive
be
me,
trying.
but
Oh,
you
yeah, I got
smell
some of my
strongly.
items back at least.
Impson
Oh,
said
cool.
weirdly. His long pointy nose was too close
Actually,
to my
that's not too
face as
terrible.
he sniffed me.
I'll take it. I'll
Strongly,
take it.
I was about to ask when a loud roar rang out through the village. It was different from the ones Behemoth had been making before. Well, I thought we had more time for pleasantries.
You are
up,
a boy.
Agatha got up out of her seat in a flash and flicked her wrist.
This is the first
A large black
chapter
folding
that
fan
we
appeared
meet
in her
Agatha.
hand. There is a demon coming to devour your
I
friend.
love her backstory.
She said her smile turned sour, and she hid it behind the fan. A tight pain gripped my
dang
chest.
Well, I
keep
guess we have no
putting Fenrir
choice
in
really
danger,
but to
I thought. I had gotten lost in my self-hatred when another
waste
roar
an
rang
iron
out.
ore.
I had no time for thinking. Where is Fenrir? If you did anything to him,
Or do I have
I will
a...
kill
That's
you.
right, I had two
I said,
pieces of
seething
cobblestone
with
in
anger.
here, didn't I?
I felt hot.
No,
boiling
because I
in
pulled it out
rage.
like an idiot.
Like I said, young
but
man,
we
I let
have
him outside.
plenty of wood.
She fanned her face to hide her words. I turned and ran towards the far end of our hut. We called it our war
let's
corner.
see here.
I ran
We are
over
going
and
to
grabbed
fix that
my
right away
bow and
so
my
that doesn't
quiver.
keep
I looked all
happening.
over the room for a sword or a large knife. With no luck, I turned and ran out of the house. I was about to head towards the village when another footstep
Is that a
propped the
hole?
ground,
Okay.
and another
I
loud
thought I had
roar
another
rang
hole that I
out.
was just going to
I
keep
looked up in
potentially
amazement.
dying on.
A giant stood
ooh,
at the far
gravel.
end of the valley. It looked
Alright.
like it had jumped
It
down
hurts.
from the
Oh wait,
mountain.
we don't have to
I
waste
could
it
not
because
make
we can
out
just
any
do...
details, but from the distance it must have had a
Yeah.
height of 30 feet. Fenrir, how if you hear me?
I was
screamed
almost
at the
a
top
even
of my
bigger
lungs
idiot
with
than I thought I was
everything had.
idiot-eating.
The largest blood-curdling roar yet rang out. The sound made spruce and pine trees sway in the distance. It came from the giant demon's direction and the ground began to shake more rapidly. The beast was racing towards us. It was quickly coming into view.
Oh,
It
dude,
was
oh wait,
terrifying.
Rowlet's
The
dead.
demon
Gosh
stood
dang
30
it,
feet
dude.
tall
If
and
Rowlet
had
was
the
alive,
body
we
of a
could have got
naked
some
man.
easy levels,
Large
and we
black
could use those
tattoos
rare
like
candies
those
on it
Agatha
before we
had been
fell into
all
the
over
abyss
its
and
body.
wasted them.
Fenrir, howl again, buddy. I yelled. I was running out of time to look for Fenrir. This demon was bloodthirsty for something. You smell strongly? I thought, is that what Impson meant? Realization grew in my mind. It wants us, my soul, Fenrir's soul. Fear gripped me until I heard Fenrir howl out. It sounded like he was coming from the same direction as the demon. Oh God, Fenrir, what have you done this time? I sighed and knocked an arrow onto my bow. I felt courage well up and give me the strength I needed to continue. I dug my feet
Heck
into
yeah.
the ground and launched myself in the direction
the
of the
idea.
demon. I was jumping more than running. My strides were so powerful. I was cruising through the streets of our village. I felt so light and nimble. I made my way past the church and noticed that the crater was gone. I heard another howl, and it confirmed Fenrir was safe. I decided to head into the graveyard and see what happened. I hoped that if we laid low the demon would keep moving. I was afraid to confront it. I walked into the graveyard. To my amazement I saw Behemoth the scythe leaning against a magnificent new stone. I felt this weird pull towards the stone, and I made my way towards it. I felt my throat swelling up and my eyes were softening their ducts.
We're gonna waste some
I
dirt.
knew exactly what this was. I walked around the face and looked at the writing carved onto the stone. I burst into tears at the words that read our names, dates, and a message from my parents. The stone's plaque read, Tyrell Larson 1109A 1125. Fenrir Larson 1120A 1125. Forgive and protect. How is this here, Behemoth? I asked. Tears were streaming down my face, and it was all I could do just to hold my head up towards the sky. Today is Sunday. Every 7 days purgatory gets realigned with the living world. Therefore the crater I made is gone and this new gravestone is here. Blue smoke flowed softly out of the shimmer of the blade from the scythe. The blue ox's face
Redstone and
appeared
bones,
in the
nice.
reflection of
We
the
can
sterling silver
turn
blade.
that into bone meal
What
and go
does it
get
say?
some more wood real
I
quick.
asked. I was embarrassed to admit it,
Actually, we
but I
should
could
save
not
it.
read. It shows the dates for which the two of you perished. It also states the following.
Oh, when did we get a
Forgive and
sunstone?
protect. Behemoth read the words kindly. A loud cry roared out and
I wonder
it
if
sent
that
shivers
spawned
down
as
my
one of the
spine.
random
The demon was near our village. I panicked and
ores
dropped
that we
my
got?
bow and the knife onto
Because
the
we're in
ground.
the underground?
I braced myself and grabbed the scythe. I dug my feet deep into the ground and wrapped my hands around the handle of the silver scythe. I turned to run while wielding it like some sort of berserker. It did not budge. I turned back and gripped it and lifted it with everything my legs and back could give. Behemoth burst into a roar of laughter. You will never be able to wield me, let alone lift me. The face of the blue ox looked amused. I will have you know I was able to lift an entire spruce tree out of the ground. I think I am strong enough to move a scythe, I said through grit teeth. Behemoth roared into more laughter and replied, it takes more than strength to move a forest. His words got under my skin, and I pulled harder. I got the scythe to lift ever so slightly from the ground. For a split second I thought I had it, but it fell to the ground with a loud crash. How dare you drop me, mortal? Behemoth roared. A loud roar from the direction of the demon replied. I heard Fenrir let out a cry in the distance. Moments later he crashed into the graveyard. He landed with a thud and skid across the grass and dirt flung into the air. The demon had kicked him. Panic and fear were now motivating my attempts to lift Behemoth and the scythe he was imprisoned in. I won't let you hurt Fenrir, I yelled. A deep heat began to emanate from the weapon. A thick blue smoke enveloped my arm and filled me with extra strength. I lifted the scythe with ease. Behemoth roared and let out a boisterous laugh. I barely caught a
There's a
glimpse
lot of
of his
goodies in that
smile
one.
as I dug my heels into the dirt, and I jumped into the air. To move a forest, you need a reason to. Behemoth roared as I tried to force the silver blade through the demon's neck. It connected but it did not slice. I felt a sharp pain from the entire left side of my body. The demon stumbled slightly and then retaliated with a slap. The demon's hand alone was larger than my body. The blow sent me soaring through the graveyard. I flew until I
thought they were
crashed
gonna knock
through a
me off
large
there.
stone
Huh.
wall. It exploded into chunks of rock and dust scattered the area.
I
It
wonder,
momentarily
can
blocked
I
out my
move-
sight.
move?
My anger
Thank you.
boiled. I was furious at how helpless I felt. Again, I never could accomplish anything while I was alive. Why would it be any different in death? I thought. A deep sadness I had been running from my entire life overwhelmed me. A loud familiar howl broke through the dust and my thoughts pulled me back to the moment. Judging by the position, distance, and tone, I gathered that Fenrir was in position, and he was ready to attack the demon. I took a deep breath and ran easily to the
That's what I thought it
stunning
was.
handle of the scythe. I felt the deep curve as it bent into the crescent moon shape. My fingertips rested perfectly against the golden vines that ran along the handle. They functioned as there. I felt the cool touch of the golden vines along Behemoth's handle. My grip tightened and I took a deep breath. I pulled Behemoth closer and steadied my stance. I remembered the words my father would yell drunkenly at me during our training sessions. "If you can't take a hit, you don't deserve to sit," he would say. It would often refer to him making me stand during dinner, until I stopped crying. The memory made me chuckle. "You don't hit as hard as my old man," I said mockingly. I spat blood onto the ground and wiped debris from my tunic. I heard a snicker, and I looked up behind me. On the roof of the church sat the witch from earlier. She sat with one leg casually draped over the other. She waved her fan in front of her face as she sarcastically cheered. "You got this, sick boys." Her words were tantalizing, but they sounded like poison in my ears. Her taunts deepened my irritation. More blue smoke came from the amethyst grapes before I could call out to her. Another smack from the demon sent me spiraling into the side of the church. I felt the wood splinter behind me. I was surprised that I did not crash through the woods like I had with a stone wall. I looked behind me and I saw a pink transparent bubble. The bubble had caught me and softened my impact. "Make sure to thank Miss Agatha. She wasted her precious magic on you," I heard the green man say. "Thanks, Agatha. I will not waste the chance." I grit my teeth and gripped the handle. I ran as fast as I could and leapt into the air as high as I could before I yelled out to Fenra, "My go." I yelled while driving the blade of the scythe down into the head of the demon. Its face twisted in pain, and it let out a blood-curdling cry. I felt the metal ding as it rang from striking the demon's skull. The demon stumbled backwards and rushed his hands to his face. However, before it could regain its composure, Fenrir struck. He came running out from behind a bush and lunged at the giant. He slashed with his claws and a deep gash opened on the demon's chest. The demon roared. Fenrir ran around it and jumped onto its back. Fenrir bit down on the nape of the creature's neck. It roared and reached for Fenrir. Fenrir did not notice, and the demon grabbed him. It threw him into the side of the church and more splinters shot into the air. Fenrir yelped. "Fenrir, I'm coming," I shouted. I set Behemoth down and pulled my bow from my back. I knocked an arrow and let it fly. It struck the demon in its eye. Blood splashed as it flailed, and it tried to pull the arrow out. I heard a squishing sound as the demon pulled out the arrows along with its eye. It screamed and threw it to the ground. "Let's finish this, Fenrir," I called out. I gripped Behemoth tightly and the blue smoke enveloped my arm. A small symbol of an ox appeared on the back of my right hand in blue. We ran in opposite directions around the disoriented demon and struck. I cleaved the demon through its side and Fenrir slashed at its throat. A bright flash of light exploded out of the demon through cracks that began to form in its skin. It let out one final roar before it erupted into a handful of tiny white flames. They danced majestically where the demon had just stood. I watched in awe at the sight. They swayed and moved brilliantly in the sky. "Now Tyrell, hold the scythe up to them," Behemoth called out. I rose the blade up towards the flames. Behemoth's face appeared in the reflection. He began sucking in a large breath of air and the white flames sucked into the scythe. In and out of focus in the shimmer of the blade, unfamiliar faces smiled. They looked relieved as they floated past on an invisible current. It was nothing like the faces I witnessed on Death's scythe. Leviathan. I felt energy well up inside of me for a moment and a gust of wind blew. "I accept you as my wielder, Tyrell Larson." Behemoth nodded in approval in the reflection. Before I could ask more about the flames and Behemoth's words, Agatha called out from the doorway of the church. "Great job, kid. I honestly thought I was going to have to step in." She laughed as she walked into the building. Behemoth and I made an awkward exchange of glances. Fenrir barked, "You did amazing. You truly are meant to be grim." I praised Fenrir. I placed Behemoth on my back, and I made my way towards the church. Thank you for your help also, Behemoth. I made sure to tell him how much I appreciated it. I entered the church and saw Agatha and Impson sitting on one of the benches in the large open room. I entered and set Behemoth down against the wall. Fenrir followed in next to me. He made his way towards the green man and sat down. Fenrir began licking himself and mending bruises he had gotten. Impson began to pet Fenrir. Agatha patted the seat next to her and waved me over. She wore a bright, proud smile on her face. I knew you were not in any real danger, so do not be mad. She laughed sarcastically. Did you summon that thing here? I asked. Agatha shook her head. Kind of. Technically you and I both did. Demons are always hunting for human souls, she replied. Impson spoke up from next to her. He looked tiny sitting next to Fenrir. I told you. You smell strongly. He spoke.
That's what Impson
He
said,
straightened
not
his
you, the
glasses.
viewer. You smell wonderful.
Now that we
Thank you for
finally
tuning
have a
in.
chance to talk, why were you in my house earlier? I asked. I sighed and
I'm not
felt
getting all the
relief
chat.
washing over
I'm not
me.
getting any chat,
I
actually.
felt like for the moment, I could relax. Agatha got up and took a couple of steps forward. She turned and put her hands behind her
Probably
back
because
and
nobody's
leaned
saying
forward.
anything.
Her cleavage bulged out the top of her laced
I think.
dress.
I don't know.
She looked at me with a large grin on her face. Even with
If you
her
said
only
something
have
I
one
missed it, I
eye,
apologize.
I knew she had winked at me. She slowly moved her without trouble to the bottom of her dress and slowly pulled her hands up. She revealed more and more skin as she raised the skirt above her thigh. I blushed and tried to look away, but my pubescent mind had my eyes locked on her fingers. A black leather book interrupted my daydream as it came into view. It had a silver pentagram embedded in the cover. Agatha unstrapped it from a leather strap she had around her thigh. She flipped it open to a book and spoke words I did not understand. A small glowing orb appeared in the air in front of me and I saw the picture of what appeared to be a man. However, he was not a man. He had the head of an owl. This is the Demonoman, she said. Her voice was more serious now. I looked closer at the picture in the orb. The man wore a black suit. The collar was ruffled, and a white shirt could be seen underneath it. He stood with his hands in his pockets. His head was that of a grey and white owl. A large beak sat where his mouth should be. He had two amber eyes. Two large grey and white speckled wings stretched from his back. Every feather had an eyeball sewed into it. They all looked tormented. We need you to help us kill him and retrieve my eye. She rubbed the scar on her face as she spoke. She flipped to another page in her book and summoned an extravagant chair. To be more exact, Miss Agatha requires her full magical ability. Impson replied. He was swinging his feet playfully as he rubbed Fenrir's fur. What do you mean? I asked. I couldn't pull my eyes away from the demon in the orb. The sight of him filled me with unease. Agatha waved her hand and took her seat. Let me tell you the story of how I came to Purgatory. How Lucifer stole my sister away, and how I met Impson. She snickered. I noticed Impson's pointy ears droop slightly at the mention of their meeting. I nestled in and waited to hear Agatha's story.
Coming up on chapter 5. It's taking forever to load. For me, anyways. Are we stuck on chapter 5 over here too? We are.
Chapter 5. The Curse of the Deathless Death. I sat in the church waiting for Agatha to begin her story. Fenrir was sitting next to Impson, who was petting him. Agatha sat in her luxurious chair and sat staring at the orb floating in the air. She locked her green eye on the demon's picture within. Amun is a young prince of hell. He is more of an inconvenience than anything. He stole my right eye. Your right eye holds your knowledge. By taking your eye, a man can steal away some of your memories. In my case, he stole my magic. Agatha laid back in her chair and rubbed her hand across her scar. That isn't even the reason I am in this wretched place, she said sadly. Agatha sat back in her chair. This first part one only kind of know because my sister would always talk about her prince, and how he was coming to rescue her, Agatha said. She looked towards the floor for a moment before starting her story.
I was born under a cursed moon. My mother had been outcasted from her coven of witches. My sister ran away with my mother. They ran deep into the mountains, where they happened upon an abandoned cabin. My mother delivered me here. However, she died in the process. My mother was not a nice witch. She was kicked out of her coven for performing experimental magic on her fellow witches. She apparently cursed my sister with her dying words. You must prepare Agatha for anything she may face in life. She must become the strongest witch to have ever been. If you fail me, daughter, then may my soul drag you down to hell with me, where I will personally take over your torture. My mother died with those harsh final words. My sister Agnes was only 12 years old. She was alone in a freezing cabin on top of a mountain. It was winter and the nearest village was a 7-day walk. My sister was desperate. She tore through our mother's belongings looking for something. She found it, a leather-bound book with a silver pentagram embedded into the cover. The Book of the Damned is what my sister needed. She rushed over to my mother's corpse. Agnes soaked her hands in our mother's blood and painted the symbol of the goat within the center of a pentagram. She flipped open the book and began to recite an ancient forbidden spell. She finished the incantation and submitted her prayers. I don't know who else to turn to. Please, my lord, help me bless my sister with everything she needs. I need you to help me make my mother's final wish come true. She spoke into the cold night's air. She cut her wrist and dripped blood onto the symbol of the goat, and the fireplace went out. A few moments passed. A blue flame slowly began to smolder and burn inside of the fireplace. A loud howl broke through the silence of the winter's night. The blue ember burst into an explosive flame. The most stunning man walked out of the flame. He was escorted by a beautiful white wolf with 2 red eyes. The man walked over to my sister and rested his hand on her head. He mumbled a few things, and my sister fell to the floor convulsing. The man turned and knelt to pick me up. He brushed the afterbirth from my face and kissed my forehead. He whispered something in my ear and set me down on the ground next to my sister. The man turned back towards the fireplace and stood next to the white wolf. My sister stopped seizing and shot up. I understand. 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days. We will meet again. Thank you from the knowledge to tutor my sister everything she will need. The man nodded and smiled a devilish grin as he turned to leave back into the fireplace. Agnes sat there with me all night smiling. She knew everything would be a broken bar until our time together was up. I was only 6 years old, and I was a prodigy in everything I tried. My sister taught me every form of martial arts, education, sciences. The only thing my sister never once mentioned to me was magic. I never knew my sister and Ma were witches. I had no idea that I was a witch. If there is one thing a demon is good at, it is sticking to a contract. The demon arrived at the exact time he said he would, and he took my sister back into purgatory with him. No matter how hard I tried to fight the man, my strength was useless. I was only 6.5 years old when my sister left me. It went all right for a while. One day, however, I found my sister's secret tree. She had been stashing anything related to magic within this tree. I found out about my mother's old coven, and I made my way down the mountain across many streams and crossings. This journey took me almost 2 years. I would stop in villages for weeks or months at a time. It was a pointless journey. The sins of me Ma was too great, and the sentence was passed down to me. The coven had banished me also. As fate would have it though, another witch was also being banished that day. She was an incredibly old woman. She looked moments away from death.
Alright, everybody, I
Harsh
think I'm
shite,
gonna leave that
I
as
said as I
that.
walked
or
over to offer
leave
the
that
old
there.
woman help.
I'm starting to get pretty
Hands
tired
off me,
listening back to
child.
the
The old woman
last 5
snapped.
chapters of
She grabbed me by
The
the
Church's
arm and in
Grim.
an instant threw me
We
over
died
her
so
shoulder.
much, that was pretty
the old woman's
exhausting.
throw laid out flat on my
And
back.
embarrassing.
I laid
But
the
thanks
stunned
so much
while
for
I
coming
looked
along.
up
I
at
really
the clouds
appreciate
dancing
you taking
past.
the time
I broke
and
out laughing.
checking the stream.
I could not believe
Sorry
that
if
this
it
old
wasn't
woman
that
was able to flatten me
entertaining of a
so
live
easily.
stream.
Ya
I
got
was
me.
just
I
hoping
said, while
to
getting
get some
up.
practice in.
Why
Really,
are
this is
ya
my
getting
first
kicked out anyways?
live
Aren't
stream
ya like
back,
1,000 years old? The old lady
basically.
had a boisterous laugh
So
and replied,
giving
clever
her
insult
the
if
old
you were
college
not so
try.
close
So
to the
thanks for
truth.
tuning in.
I am
And
988
hopefully
years
we
old.
can try this
The
again
woman
and
stood up straight
work
and her
out some
back
settings
cracked
so it's
in
not so
100
laggy
places.
next time.
Besides, little girl,
Thanks so much for
what are
tuning
you,
in. I'll
like
see you in the
6
next
years
one.
old? She mocked. I'm 8.5.
How do I
I
stop
replied,
streaming?
do you have a
Is that what
place to
every
stay,
new
young
person's
lady?